Hi. This video is about the hormonal shifts of fathers, particularly new fathers, as they're welcoming children into their lives. Hormonal balance is important for physical and emotional well-being, and the conversation that we have societally typically focuses on mothers, and for good reason. But this is important for fathers to talk about because of those unique challenges around caregiving, sleepless nights, and stress that can impact our well-being and might have a hormonal component. I term this the forgotten hormonal shifts of fatherhood because I found in my own personal experience, as well as in the experience of those fathers that I've worked with, this just isn't really a part of the conversation. And so, again, while that focus on mothers is important because of those dramatic hormonal shifts, we tend to forget or maybe overlook this important shift that fathers are going through. And there are two significant shifts that we're going to focus on herein. It's testosterone and cortisol. These shift dramatically and can have a direct impact on our well-being as fathers. Both our physical and our emotional experience of fatherhood can be impacted by our hormone levels. These are hormones that you're probably already familiar with, but we're going to talk about how they impact us and simple steps we can take to boost them in our lives. So first, testosterone. Now, this is often linked to traits like energy and assertiveness and competitiveness and having sexual libido. Testosterone is also helpful with motivation and muscle maintenance, mood regulation, and even risk taking. It plays a role in a lot of different functions. Research has shown that fathers typically experience a drop in testosterone levels within the first year of fatherhood. And that's not to say that it's going to happen for everybody, or everyone's going to experience it the same way, or that there's something wrong with it. We actually think that there might be some reasons that this happens. That lower testosterone encourages fathers to focus on bonding and caregiving rather than competing or asserting dominance. And so we think about that as a shift in biological priorities in order to focus on home, focus on connecting with loved ones. This can link to other behavioral shifts. Instead of being called to go out and hunt and protect and kind of assert this traditional masculinity, there's a shift in order to be a provider, to focus on home, to focus on others. I think both of these seem like really helpful approaches to conceptualize or lenses to view some of this dip. However, it comes with challenges. That lower testosterone can lead to reduced energy, so increased feelings of fatigue or kind of lack of that get up and go. It can affect our mood, so we might experience a drop in our mood. Decreased libido, so we might be less interested in sex or sexual engagement. We might feel less motivated or less directed. And so while there may be good reasons that we experience this drop in testosterone, it can still come with some challenges that we don't necessarily feel like we used to. And when we approach that, we can now approach it with compassion and empathy, knowing that this isn't something that's wrong with us, that if we experience a drop in our sex drive, that we don't shame ourselves for that. Instead, acknowledge that there might be some biological components to that, something at play that we might be able to impact and directly influence with our behavior choices. The second hormonal shift is around cortisol. And this is when our body responds to stress. It helps us stay alert, mobilizes energy. It's really that stress response. This is when we perceive that there's a threat and we mobilize all our resources to address it. However, we can't live in a prolonged elevated cortisol state, right? We can't live in crisis because those increased levels can influence our mood, can disrupt our sleep, can influence our immune response, and impact our ability to connect meaningfully with others because we're stressed out. But we naturally experience this elevation in cortisol due to the stressors of parenthood, right? We're experiencing disruptions in our sleep or sleep dysregulation. Emotional demands are increased. We're constantly pulled in to provide care. There's increased financial pressures that we're now, for many fathers, they're all of a sudden thinking more about how much money do we have? How much money are we making? Where's the money going? And it changes relationships with our partners. These sources of support that we were used to now are much more focused on the child, as they should be. These are all natural occurring aspects of parenthood, and they all contribute to increased and chronic elevation of cortisol. So in this way, we're acknowledging that stress is not just psychological. It's not just the way we're thinking about it, but instead becoming fathers signals or triggers a biological shift in preparation for caregiving, protection, and providing resources to our loved ones. Without proper awareness and maintaining this, This chronic elevated stress can lead to burnout, anxiety, and even depression. And we might sometimes start to misinterpret or view these experiences as symptoms of our weakness or our deficiency in some way, and that is not the case. These are natural occurring ebbs and flows in our hormonal balance. And this is part of why it's important to talk about this forgotten stuff, is because as fathers, we are whole people. We don't just show up as helpers or bystanders, we're active members of the family, providing resources, care, everything. And in order to show up in the best ways that we can, we need to understand that we are going through these profound biological transformations during parenthood. Our hormones are shifting, and we can do something about that because that hormonal shift impacts our emotions, impacts our thoughts, and all of this changes the way that we show up. So let's make sure that we're taking steps to care for ourselves. Because fathers aren't unchanged by fatherhood. We need to stop pretending as if they just show up the same way before their child and after their child. We need to develop a fuller picture of the transformation that's happening. And by embracing or understanding these biological shifts that fathers are going through, we can better navigate them, both emotionally, psychologically, and behaviorally, so that we are showing up in the ways that we want to, in the ways that reflect the fathers we are becoming. The good news is that a lot of these actions that we can take, these behaviors that we can change, will impact both our testosterone levels and our cortisol levels. So it's kind of that classic feeding two birds with one hand. As a preface, I want to clarify I'm a counselor, I'm not a physician, I'm not a dietitian, and so this is something for you to take and find what fits best for you. First thing to think about is sleep, and that can be elusive even in the best of times, particularly with a newborn at home. However, a sufficient amount of sleep boosts testosterone, decreases cortisol, and so we want to be talking with our partner about how we're going to navigate that together to ensure that we're balancing our sleep needs as well as their sleep needs. The second is physical activity and exercise. Now, strength training is particularly helpful with testosterone, but really any sort of exercise is going to help us create a good foundation for testosterone as well as decreasing our cortisol levels. It doesn't need to be an everyday, all-consuming thing. You don't need to go out and join a gym, but starting to think about small steps that you can take or ways that you can integrate physical activity into your day-to-day life. The third is around nutrition. Now, testosterone and cortisol may need slightly different things, but they don't cancel each other out. So it can be part of a larger picture that you're taking towards your meal prep or planning during the week. Vitamin D, healthy fats, low sugar, high fiber. This all sounds like good stuff, and it goes a long way to help with those internal hormonal levels. This doesn't mean that we need to upend our lives and change everything, but being more intentional with each step and decision that we're making around what we're putting into our bodies is going to benefit us in the long run. The fourth is about alcohol. That alcohol can reduce testosterone and increase our stress hormone, though alcohol can initially be kind of a relaxing and calming substance. I'm not here to encourage abstinence or tell you the types of decisions that you should be making. There's no should or supposed to. Instead, it's about thinking before drinking. What are you consuming, how often and how much, and for what reasons? Knowing that this is going to impact your ability to show up effectively in other areas of your life. So while having a few drinks might help you relax at the end of the day, it might impair your ability to show up effectively the next day. And so being thoughtful about, again, when, where, and how much. Getting into the outdoors can be really helpful. I mentioned vitamin D before, and getting out into the sun can be great for testosterone. Kind of getting out and moving, being in nature is also very helpful for calming, reducing our cortisol levels, decreasing that stress. And so getting out into the parks, getting out into the forest, getting out in your neighborhood, all of this can benefit you in your hormonal state. The sixth area is about sexual health and sexual relationship. And with a newborn, this can be particularly tough to talk about. And this will come up in a module later on. But for now, we want to acknowledge that having sexual contact can actually boost our testosterone levels. So engaging in a sexual relationship with our partner, as well as that sexual relationship can decrease stress and decrease cortisol levels. So Engaging in conversations about sex with our partner, coming up with an understanding about where we feel comfortable and how we might connect can benefit our hormones. The seventh is about relationship and connecting with people. That staying connected with others can help us regulate our mood and help decrease our stress and our cortisol. Being able to talk about what's going on for us with loved ones, with friends, with family, and maybe even with a counselor can help us reduce our stress and manage our well being. And that brings us to the eighth, which is mindfulness. And this is tough because cortisol, increased cortisol, is going to decrease our testosterone. Right? So engaging in mindfulness-based practices is going to help regulate our cortisol, which is going to help regulate our testosterone. It's a bit of a bummer that the two are interrelated, but it's something that we can impact by taking these intentional steps and changing our behaviors in a really meaningful way. And a lot of these activities can involve our children, except for the sexual relationship. We can connect with them, we can think about nutrition together, we can exercise together, we can get out into nature together. All this is beneficial for ourselves and for our kids. And making these changes, aligning our biology with our caregiving, this isn't about us becoming more masculine or manly or fixing something that's broken. It's really about us trying to meet the demands of caregiving, that our inner biology is shifting. And so we can do things to help promote our well being. And in doing that, in improving our testosterone and reducing our cortisol, we can show up in more present, energized, and resilient ways. And so I leave with an encouragement. Look over this list. Think about the things that you might be able to experiment with. Try something on for size. See how it fits. See how you respond to it. Because caring for ourselves is essential for caring for our families. We need to show up for our well being in order to show up for their well being. Thanks so much.